and intro the show, intro you, turn it to me. I'll say a blurb about me. And then, Mike, I'll do a brief introduction of you. And from there, have you explain a little bit more about your background. And
Sure.
then you and I will just kind of go from there, talking about how job searching and sales have a lot of commonalities. And we'll talk about what all that means. And now, that's about it. And then at about 1:45 or so, we'll just ask you to wrap up. What are the takeaways you want people to have? And then Teddy and I will share. I'll actually share a story about an interview that I did not want, where I did not want the job and I failed to ask for the job. And when I called for follow-up just to get my ego stroked to see if they really wanted to hire me, and the lady said, the job essentially was yours. You did great up until the end, and I will never offer a job to somebody who doesn't ask for it. And very similar to sales, you can't just assume that they're going to jump forward. You need to make him aware that you're interested in the job. So it's one of those life lessons, I guess.
Yep. Just one of them, right, Randy?
Just one of the life lessons.
Just one of them.
I had a guy come to my interview once, and he said, "Now, what exactly is it your company does again?"
Well,
Needless to say, that interview was shortened by 50%.
All right. We're live on Facebook, kids. So didn't see that coming, did you? All right, everybody. It's about 3 minutes before the hour. Randy Wooden and Teddy Burriss with our special guest, Mr. Mike Brock. So hang tight. We're gonna go live here in a few minutes, and let's say I gotta get it all ready on Facebook. We're good. So Mike, did you get a good night's sleep last night?
Last night was an interesting night. I donate platelets once a month with the Red Cross, and normally when you do that, you are really tired because you're literally taking the blood out, your whole bloodstream out around 3 times, and so you're really tired. And usually I crash really hard and sleep like a rock. Didn't so last night, but that's my excuse, and I'll stick with it.
All right, Randy, is there any reason why I can't broadcast and go live now?
I think it's a good idea. Why don't we try doing that?
All right. All right, we're live on Facebook. We're live on Zoom. Mike, you know how Randy and I measure participants, right?
With a ruler?
One thing we didn't discuss.
We didn't discuss that, but
Oh.
no.
How much I make you laugh? I know.
No, I multiply by 1,000, but don't tell anybody that.
I know that.
Yeah, okay. So we're up to 12,000 people right now. So cool beans. So.
Well, it's like Zig Ziglar always said, you're just telling the truth in advance.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, and Randy, I saw on Zoom that we're up to, I think, shades past 225,000 people who have registered.
It's growing. Yeah. It's a global thing.
Yeah, it is. I think people enjoy seeing us do what we do. So I think what they really enjoy is they enjoy us bringing good, smart, intelligent people to the conversation. So, Mike, did you give the link to somebody else?
Yes.
So don't know. I'm going to bump her down to an attendee. Okay. So you're welcome to hang out, but I got to bump you down to an attendee because you're going to steal the show away from Mike just because you got a better smile than he does. So hang tight. I'm going to switch you over. Who is that, Mike?
That's Sylvia Gray. She's a top level executive recruiter who is a great friend.
Cool. Well, I need you to introduce her to me, but I'm going to bump her down to attendee. So Sylvia, you'll be here. You won't be where you're at, and your video will go off.
Okay.
Mike.
My bad.
You never give out your URL. Where'd she go? There she goes. She's an attendee now. Now we're up to 19,000 people, dude. So, and I'm going to stop share because Randy, it's noon.
It's time.
It's time. Yeah.
Once again.
Good stuff. Hey, everybody. I'm Teddy Burriss. This is my good buddy, Mr. Randy Wooden. And this is the Randy Wooden and Teddy Burriss lunch conversation. Our special guest today is Mr. Mike Brock, who's we've known each other for years. Mm-hmm. And Mike's going to bring a conversation, or bringing a conversation to the show today. Let me get my my notes out here in front of me. And so the conversation's about job search and sales, and I'm gonna let Mike and Randy explain that. And Randy, am I supposed to introduce? I think I'm supposed to introduce our sponsor today, aren't I?
Yeah, you do that, and then throw it to me, and I'll introduce myself and Mike, and then we'll get started today.
Cool. And so those who don't know me, I'm Teddy Burriss. I'm a LinkedIn strategist, and I'm also a volunteer in helping the career space. That's why I'm here. Our sponsor is Brookmead Holdings, great organization, does outplacement coaching, career coaching for individuals and of all different spaces. So we're grateful for Brookmead helping us out. So Randy, you take it over from here, buddy.
Yep, I appreciate it. And for those that are tuned in, we've got 25,000 so far. We expect maybe to double that crowd today, because this guy down below here, Mike Brock, he's sharp, and you're going to pick up some good pointers today. By the way, if you are watching, let us know where you're watching from, and also chat your questions in the chat box. But my name is Randy Wooden. I work for Goodwill Industries here in Winston-Salem. That's Goodwill of Northwest North Carolina, and I run our professional center. Teddy does some volunteer work in terms of helping job hunters. For me, that's my primary source of income. Again, director for our center. So whether you're in transition currently or employed and looking, our services are free. I host some LinkedIn workshops, and also Teddy and I got a wild hair about 6 or 8 months ago and said, hey, why not put together a show about job hunting and bring on guests to talk about different topics. And so this week is no different. Mike Brock joins us. Mike is a sales executive. Mike, I've known you for years as well. So the three of us kind of run in some of the same circles, it seems like, over these last years. But let me turn it to you, Mike, to give us kind of a brief bio of you. But our topic today will be the parallels between job hunting and being in sales. And there are a lot of these. So we're going to cover these things today. But Mike, take it away. Who's Mike Brock?
Well, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for inviting me. And the fact that you publicly acknowledge that you know me is also a feather in my hat today. So thank you. Randy and I have similar interest in ties.
We do.
And if you'd like to have a conversation that later, that'd be great. We both like Jerry Garcia ties. And that actually, I think when we met, we were both wearing Jerry Garcia ties.
We were, and I've got it on my Facebook page, and we'll post that in the comments after this thing airs. We're going to put it on YouTube
cool.
and whatnot. So the world will see what some colorful ties look like. Now, we don't wear ties anymore. Do you? Much?
No. Nope. Except for a job interview.
Yeah, maybe.
Good point.
Except for a job interview. In fact, if you're on a job interview, you need to be the best dressed person in the room. And it's always easy to say to the person that's interviewed you, and they're all casually dressed, say, hey, is it okay if I take my tie off? And that kicks it down a notch. But as far as my background, I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Purdue University. Also have an MBA from Oklahoma Christian. And I've been in automotive background almost my entire career. And I think one of the things that ultimately qualifies me to be able to present to you folks today is the fact that I've been through 3 corporate takeovers in my life. And because of the corporate takeovers, they said, bye, Mike, we don't need you anymore. And it wasn't one of those, gee, I saw it coming deals. And so I've learned over the years, and lots changed over the years on job searching and networking. And you'll hear me talk more about that later. And today, currently, I run an automotive component laboratory. And we test parts to failure, specifically interior parts of cars like leather, plastic, aluminum. We look at steering wheels. We look at instrument panels. And we have all kinds of cool stuff that can test them. I won't bore you with all the details. My background is electronics, so this I'm having to learn this industry We just opened an operation in Querétaro, Mexico, as part of our expansion. So we're based out of Mönchengladbach, Germany. So our customers are generally Mercedes, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, Jaguar, BMW. So we have most of the Euro brands, but we're expanding here in the U.S. as well. So that's enough of my background as far as the technical side. But in terms of history, I've actually been downsized 4 times in my career. So there's an old saying: there is no job guarantee. And 2, if you work for a big company, you're just a line item in the budget. And a lot of truth to both of those things. And I'll talk real straight. I don't sugarcoat anything for you.
Eddie has a garage full of those cars you just talked about. I don't know if you knew that or not, but Mercedes, all of those. He and Jay Leno are like this.
Dude, did we not talk about this?
They are cars.
I haven't heard this before. This is new information.
Yeah, well, it's new to Teddy too, but.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I got to call security and make sure you don't come to my garage anymore.
Mike, you've been around the block. You said, you've had a good long career. You've also been cut 4 times, let go through a variety of mergers and acquisitions. So you're a sales guy, but you're also a job hunt guy in that you've lived it not only from the, I'm a job hunter, but also you've lived it from the hiring official side.
Yep.
And what's interesting, and I share this a lot with clients, particularly those who are in sales and marketing, as opposed to engineering and accounting. The skills for people in sales and marketing, the communication skills, the self-promotion skills, the demonstrating value, the frankly talking about yourself, all of those are skills that typically rest more so with people in sales and marketing versus what I'll call the number crunching analytical folks in the accounting and engineering side. And so you as a sales guy are competing with people who are also highly skilled in the same areas that you are. You've got to be even better. But you can take solace if you're somebody who's an accountant or maybe in engineering, in that maybe your competition isn't as comfortable with or skilled at the selling side. And so maybe you don't have to be as good as a sales guy would have to be to land the job. And that's been a concern of job hunters. I'm not a sales guy. But Mike, let's talk your first point today, which is everybody is in sales. Go.
Absolutely. Everybody sells. And people say, well, I don't like to sell. I don't like to, I think I have a stereotype of what a sales guy or salesperson looks like and how they act. Yeah. And I will tell you, as a young child, I was an extreme introvert. I mean, and Teddy will like this. I was so shy, I couldn't even lead in silent prayer. And so I've had to learn to overcome some of that. That's not original. I borrowed it, by the way. And I've had to make a personal choice to be more. Last week we had the speaker on personalities, and you take the 4 personality types. And I'm not, I wasn't an I as a kid. I was an S, but now I'm an I with a high D. So part of that's by choice. But everybody sells. If you've ever talked about something you're passionate about, if you have a hobby that you really love, or you went to a great movie, or you went to a restaurant that was awesome, and you recommended that to your friends, guess what? You just were in the selling mode. And we don't look at it that way necessarily. My neighbor across the street owns the highest rated Italian restaurant in the metro Atlanta area. And I'm always promoting his restaurant because it's great and we love to go there. But promoting is exactly what you're doing in sales. And what you're promoting in this case is yourself. It's one of the few times that it's not considered to be arrogant to talk about yourself. And I think when it comes to everybody sells, I would like to maybe give the audience a couple of things to think about. Number one, to be good in sales, you have to be a good listener, because part of your job of listening is understanding what your customers' needs are. And so those of us they're the number crunchers and the S people, the people who are the engineers, and that's what I am by profession. But the people who are more numbers oriented, more statistical data oriented, we consider them to be the good listeners. Well, maybe not necessarily. So let me suggest, one, you spend some time and practice listening. Number two, if you like to read, there's a great book out there called Skill with People by a guy by the name of Les Giblin. It's $6 on Amazon. And let me tell you about this little book, promoted for Les. Les wrote this book in the 60s. It's my kind of book because, one, it's only about that thick.
My kind of book too.
It's my kind of book, and it's got big letters, and there's pictures,
sure,
and all that stuff. And there's a newer version out there. I think it's like $6. And I read that book years ago, and it talks about if you want a relationship with people, you got to be able to ask them questions because they really want to talk about themselves. So you got to do the reverse part there, and be willing to listen and learn that they need to find out about you. Go ahead, Ted.
What was the title of the book again, Mike?
Skill with People.
Skill, S-K-I-L-L?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I spelled it wrong.
Skill with People.
I'm trying to listen.
Les Giblin, Giblin. And it's $6. Best $6 you ever spend. So everybody sells, and we don't like to talk about ourselves. And here's what I say. If you don't like to talk about yourself, fine, get good at it.
Yeah.
Pretty straight talk. But in the interview, when I've interviewed hundreds of people, and it's the ones that are willing to, I can tell when they're shy and they're introverted. I can tell that. It's the ones that push themselves a little bit outside their box. Those are the ones I can tell are trying. And those are the ones I'll give a good listen to as a hiring manager.
You talk about being able to talk about yourself and how maybe it's uncomfortable for certain people. Do you have any tips to help people become accustomed to that, or any practice that they can do on their own to kind of get in the groove so that when they are in the interview, they actually can do a better job of talking about themselves?
Well, let me give you an indirect way first.
Yeah.
If you've done any kind of job hunt training, if you will, one of the things we'll talk about is you need to have 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 success stories of your career and some things that you can answer within about a 2-minute window. And the idea is, tell me about a time when there was stress on your job. And you mentally go through that list of success stories that you've written out, and you be able to tell that story in 2 minutes and keep their attention. And that success story is you talking about yourself. It's in a different prose. That's the indirect way of learning how to talk about yourself. There's other advantages of talking. If you go to TCN, they'll do a free job interview with it, and you get to see your videotape, and you get to play it back. And if you're in the local Greensboro area, you should take advantage of that, because that kind of practice is great. One of the other things you can do is you can write down a list of the things you want them to know about you. What do you want them to know? And those are the things you keep up in here, but you write them down. If you write them down, you'll remember more so. Go ahead, Teddy.
Hey, we do Triad Career Network. We do every Thursday at 9 a.m. to 10:30, and we're doing it virtual now, Mike. And check it out. We're doing virtual mock interviews, and we even bring in hiring professionals, recruiters, to do mock interviews from corporations, as you well know. But we're doing this virtual. So anybody wants to know how to get that, I'll drop the link into the virtual meetings into the chat. Thank you for letting me share it, Mike.
No problem. As you know, I attended a lot of TCM meetings, and I did a mock interview, and I learned a couple of weaknesses in my interviewing schedule. One of them was my posture. It was terrible. He goes, "You're too relaxed. You're having too good a time." So, and it's okay to have a good time. You know, my motto is let's be serious and have some fun. And I think in reality, when you interview, we're all nervous, we're all edgy, but if we can force ourselves quickly to relax, get in a good posture, that nonverbal communication is huge. It's huge to the person that's interviewing you. But talking about ourselves, to finish your question, Randy, is make a list of things that are important to you. Now, don't get personal. You don't have to do that. In fact, I think generally, and you guys can attest to this, generally when you go in an interview, one of the first questions they'll ask you is, so tell me about yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things you can always say is personally or professionally, and have 4 or 5 bullet points in your brain that you can talk about fairly quickly.
Makes sense. And so if I'm hearing you, if I'm listening correctly, go in with a game plan.
Absolutely.
I think too often people tend, and I'm guilty of this too, a lot, and I know my colleagues Susan and Shaquille would vouch for this. A lot of times, I give a lot of talks, just like you guys do, and I feel like I know my material pretty well. But the amount of time I spend preparing is the amount of time I comb my hair in the morning. So a lot of times I go in and I'll wing it. If for no other reason, then it's for fun, just to test myself. But if I were interviewing, I am going to take time to learn the company and do my homework. So I do get prepared when I'm diving into areas that I'm not as familiar or comfortable with. But I like what you're saying about have a game plan where you go in and you practice. So that's a good thing. So another talking point you said is, so what are you selling? What is it you're selling when you're, I guess, yourself, right? What is it you're selling?
Well, I mean, that's the over obvious answer is, well, you're selling yourself and you're selling your competence. First of all, you wouldn't be in an interview if they didn't think you were technically competent, because your resume says, well, here's the stuff he or she can do. And they take that at first glance that that's the case. Or it may be even more profound if someone's referred you into that job, because that gives you obviously more credibility. So what are you really selling? Well, I think the first thing you're selling is your ability to look at their needs and help them solve their problems, because that's why you're there. They have a need. They have a job to fill. Maybe somebody retired. Maybe somebody quit. Maybe they're expanding, but they have a need to fill. So you're selling yourself based upon what their needs are. And I think what you said was key a minute ago, and that is do your homework, do your research. And in fact, it's okay to over research. What you need to do is now take that and use that research that you've done and mesh that up with your skills so that you can display your answers to their questions, or better yet, you have a question to them that shows you've done your homework. Mm-hmm. Those are real impressive. I interviewed with a big company not too long ago, and the HR guy, the head of HR, interviewed me, and he asked me some questions. And one of the things I've noticed on their company, they're a public company, so I looked in their corporate financials, and they'd gone through some restructuring, and they had a big restructuring bill. And I said, what was the cause of all that restructuring? And he said, dang, you got me on that question. And I said, why is that? He said, well, yeah, we talked about the restructuring, but I didn't look and really didn't get involved in the cost element. That's all financial side of the group. And I said, well, you're a shareholder in the company. Wouldn't that interest you? He goes, yeah, absolutely. He goes, that was a great question. He goes, I've never had an interviewer ask me that question before. He goes, but then again, I don't interview for too many vice presidents either. But the point being is, it showed I did my homework. And afterwards, he told me he was impressed by that. So you're selling your competency and your ability to be flexible and to be able to grow in the position that they have. If it's a canned position and they only want certain features, yeah, you can hire a lot of folks, but you want the folks that are willing to maybe take on extra or be willing to be stretched on that. And that really kind of, if it's okay with you, Randy, it really kind of leads me into my next point, and that is, what is your competitive advantage? And that's been the thing I have used for years as my key selling point of products. I'm not a direct in-your-face sales guy. I'm pretty much a side door sales guy, meaning I'll go into my customer, build a relationship, and talk about and listen mostly to what their needs are. But ultimately, they want to know what you have for them that gives them a competitive advantage. So if you can come into a job, maybe as a project manager, you can say, well, my last 4 projects, we were ahead of schedule by 30 days, and we cut the budget by 5%, and we hit all our other targets. You can talk about those kind of things specifically. That gives you a competitive advantage. Now, your competitive advantage is not telling them how bad your competition is. That's poor salesmanship. When you have to revert to, their product sucks and blah, blah, blah. If you get to where you can demonstrate either with numbers or with your past background on what it is you provide that gives you a competitive advantage in that spot, that ultimately translates into a competitive advantage for them, no matter how small it is.
In their phrase, Mike, is an acronym. I think it's a P acronym, 3 letters. Competitive. Say it again.
You talking about the problem, action, resolution?
No, I'm talking about your promise, your offer, your key performance. You know, what is it that you bring to the table? I'll think of it. It's an acronym that we use in sales about, you know, what is my competitive advantage? And I think that acronym, I'll figure it out because it's very relevant to job search as well.
Okay, good.
One thing that comes up a lot when we practice interviews, and clients stumble over this a lot. So I'd like your take on this, and it kind of dovetails with this competitive advantage. The simple question is, why should we hire you? And if all you can tell them is, the worst thing is because I need a job, I mean, we know that's not that's not the right answer.
Nope, that's not the right answer.
But if all you do is tell them, I can do a good job for you, what do you think the guy in the lobby is going to say? So how do you address that if you're a job hunter when they point blank basically say, why should we buy you versus your competitor?
Well, and generally that's not a question they ask near the beginning of the interview. That's near the end. And I would talk about two things. One, here's how I can promote your business as a competitive. I use that phrase all the time. And when I say, well, I can give you a competitive advantage. Oh, well, how can you do that? Well, these are the criteria which I believe I can help you. If you're not interviewing for the CFO job or the CEO job, sure, they can make some big decisions in the company about how the decisions work in the company. But you, as a project manager or a salesperson or an accountant or an admin, doesn't matter. What skill set you have that you bring that makes that job better? And it's not showing up on time. It's not being honest. It's not being a team player. It's not being hard. Those are expected behaviors. So I've had people tell me that's their skill set. No, that's expected behavior. So what is it that makes you better? And in some cases, you can say, I have the experience. If you're over 40, we all know that age discrimination is rampant in this country. And even though no one wants to admit it, it's really true. And so one of your competitive advantages as someone who's got some experience is say, I have experience to make more mature decisions. And
along with that, something that I talk about when it comes to that answering the question, and it goes back to what do they look for initially when they look to hire? And I think you touched on it, maybe not in these words, but you've hit on both these points, and that is competency and culture fit.
Sure.
They need to know, again, you wouldn't be in the interview if you didn't have the basic hard skills. Mm-hmm. It's a given that you're going to be honest, dependable, and trustworthy and Boy Scoutish and all of that kind of stuff. So we get that. The piece that will help to separate you is your passion, your enthusiasm, your mm-hmm. problem-solving skills. And if you can point to areas where you have demonstrated some of those things, then I think that can help you. So we know what we're selling now, I guess, right? So, and competitive advantage, we've talked a little bit about that. Was there anything else you'd like to add on that piece?
You said something. I didn't say this phrase exactly, and this is vitally important, and that is fit. And especially in today's market, fit is so important. And I've gone through interviews where I had to bring my wife. And we had a corporate dinner, and they wanted to meet my wife to see if she fit in on the deal and if what kind of person she was, and because they're looking for someone who's a leader, and I had to coach my wife on what she could talk about and what she couldn't talk about. But the idea is
the first and last time in your life that you will ever get away with doing it.
Once. I did it once.
The only time in your entire life that will ever happen.
I used the word coach. I didn't use the word. But no, fit is really important. And so when people ask the question, what's your advantage? Why should I hire you? I'm a better fit. And here's why I'm a better fit. And never leave an answer open-ended without some kind of detail. In other words, can you handle stress? Yes. That's not the answer. The answer is yes. And let me give you an example in my career of how I handle some stress. And those are all the simple rules most of us know. But when we get into an interview, whoops, that went out the window because we're nervous or excited. Go ahead, Ted.
And Greg threw out, that, he said, is your call to action in your hard close and our interview, especially the final interview, he posted out that I'm getting to the final, but I'm not closing, suggesting I might be trying too hard. And I'm with you. We often will answer questions and will not do two things. Number one is we'll share the why. Share what, don't just say I'm a better fit. Why are you a better fit? Don't just say I can handle stress, bring it on, big boy. Why do you say that? Examples. Why is the one thing we don't share. Number two, we don't put our sales statements, our tactical close conversations in context to the person we're trying to sell to. We make it all about us. Oh man, I'm the best thing since sliced bread. You ask anybody, Randy Wooden will tell you I'm good stuff, man. I'd be a perfect fit for this job. No, you've got to respond in a way in sales, including job search, make it about them.
That actually points
That's a great point.
The next point, Mike, that you were going to talk about, which is how do you translate into value? How do you translate into value? Well,
I think one of the things you can translate into value is to do something different. And one of my points that we talked about earlier was do the unexpected. Now, I don't mean do something crazy and show up inappropriately dressed or be loud and vocal or anything crazy like that. But is there a way you can demonstrate your value to them from some of your past experiences? On your resume, one of the things that I look at is, especially if I'm looking at a sales resume, can you quantify some of your activities? I increased sales by 5% from 3 million to 7 million and whatever. Those kinds of data facts give me some hard numbers to look at. And another way to demonstrate value, Randy, is when you're listening to them as you have a dialogue, you can say to them, that point you made earlier about X made me think about this. And that shows that that you're really engaged with that conversation and you've listened to their point and you took it to heart and you made the application, or it made you think about something in relationship to that and your value based upon your ability to take the input from the interviewer. And it doesn't matter whether it's HR, the boss, finance, it doesn't matter who the sender is the fact that you received the message and then you actually contemplated about it and it made you think about something else. So that listening skill and that application skill demonstrate part of fit, which is what you're trying to say. Yeah, Teddy.
Yeah. So we're halfway through our show. Teddy Burriss, my good friend Randy Wooden, and our special guest Mike Brock, and the conversation is all about job search and sales and how they're so relevant in so many ways. And it's important for Randy and I know that we can't do this by ourselves, and we're grateful that Brookmead Holdings is our sponsor for today's show. Brookmead's an outplacement career coaching organization, been doing it since '93, helping all kinds of people in all kinds of fields and roles and industries. If you're looking for career coaching at a higher level, if you know an organization needs outplacement coaching, check out Brookmead's Holdings. They're 336-814-8910. I'll drop their Facebook page in the chat box. And again, we're very appreciative of Brookmead's Holdings being our sponsor today. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Yeah. Again, we've got Mike Brock, a sales executive. You've I don't know, interviewed maybe 1,000 or certainly hundreds of people over your time. You've also been a job hunter. So you bring a unique perspective here, having been on, if you will, both sides of the desk more than once. And so again, lots that we can learn. Again, so often I hear, Mike, from clients, I'm not a sales guy. I can't sell and I don't feel comfortable in talking about myself. Even on a resume, they don't like to talk about themselves. And because maybe part of that is a generational thing. And if I might just, because let's just face it, we're all north of 40 here. And we didn't grow up with ESPN. We didn't grow up with all the flash and all the me. We didn't grow up with Twitter and Facebook and all the, hey, look at me and YouTube and everything else. And our generation and our parents' generation were taught more, hey, do the right thing, work hard, you'll be rewarded, don't blow your own horn kind of a thing. And so maybe as a generational thought here, older workers are maybe a little more hesitant to toot their own horn versus maybe people that grew up with a lot of self-indulgence and a lot of the social media. Just your thoughts, both of you guys, thoughts on that. Is that a generational thing or more of a personality thing, just unique to that individual?
I think it's a little both. Here's one thing I was taught a long time ago, and that is there's a line, and there's a barely definable line between arrogance and assertiveness.
Yeah.
And it's okay to walk right up to that line of assertiveness and arrogance. Just don't cross over. Yeah. Because if you having to tell somebody I'm great because, a lot of it's in the words that you do. The other thing that you need to make sure, the interview is about you, but there's nothing wrong if you've worked in a team environment or you were a team leader or a supervisor, you were the coach, the team helped make it happen. Yeah, you were steering the ship, but
right.
ultimately, when they succeeded, you succeeded. So it's okay to give credit to other people as well. But at the same time, at the interview, you're sharing information and you're sharing confidence. You're not sharing an attitude of arrogance. If you are, then you're going to fail.
Good point. And that points back to the culture fit. And you may have the success stories and have the hard skills, but if you come across like a jerk, we've all worked with people that are highly skilled and highly accomplished, but you can't stand to be around them. And we've also, on the flip side, Teddy,
not Teddy, no, not him.
Not Teddy. But we've also worked with people who are just salt of the earth, great people, do anything for you, but they can't count to 10. And so in that case, they're not maybe in the right job. They have great, if you will, getting along skills and love to be around you. So we look for that combination. Now, you mentioned something in one of the points you'd like to cover. So I'm kind of curious what you mean by this. Divide and conquer. Now, I've played Risk for years when I was younger. And so we will, divide and conquer and move your little armies around the globe here. But now we're talking about the job hunt. So what do you mean by divide and conquer?
Well, I kind of took a liberty, if you will, with that particular phrase. But the concept is spread the love. And by that, I mean, generally, when you go into an interview or through the interview process, you're not interviewing with just one person. And in many cases, it's a series of interviews, or you might even have a panel interview or 2 panel interviews. I had a 9-person panel interview one day. That was unbelievably tough. But the point being is that if there's 2 people in the room or you've had another interview with someone else, you can always bring in good points of the discussion you had with that person that adds credibility to the person you're interviewing with at that particular moment. In the sales world, you divide and conquer. If you got 3 people, one's being anti your sales, but the other 2 are being for your sales, then you try to get the 3 of them together and help them convince the guy that is anti sales, sell them on it. And this is just kind of a loose version of that, meaning you interview with more than 1 or 2 persons. You can say, I really felt good about my interview with Mrs. Jones because we connected here and here. And then the person interviewing you may go back and ask Mrs. Jones, is that how you felt about that? And suddenly they're in agreement. That adds more credibility to your conversation. And I mentioned earlier about saying something referring back to something they said that made you think about what it was that they said. Well, Mrs. Jones in that interview made me think about this, which related to your point. And now you've got 3 of you talking, even though only 2 of you in the room. So it's an indirect way of dividing and conquer. And it doesn't take much practice to do this. Just go through a couple hundred interviews. No, it doesn't take much practice to think about the fact that you've had an interview with someone else that lasted half an hour to an hour, and remember one key point of what they said. In fact, you should take notes, and always ask if you can, but take notes and write that down. Write down during the interview what they made you think, and then refer back to it.
Yeah. And Mike, that's important. As people get older, and some of us all around me, everybody's getting older. It's really bizarre to me how people are getting older around me. But we can't remember everything someone says to us in a conversation. And then some of us, and I no longer do this, we try to write down every word they say. You can't. You got to write down that one little jewel, that one little verb or noun or whatever those other English things are, adjectives. Write down that one word. And that is what you try to craft your story around when it's your turn to share a story in relevance to a word that they said that is meaningful to them.
Well, and if you've done your homework, you probably, if there's public information available on the company goals or values, those are the hot buttons to talk about.
Yeah.
And how, as from a competitive advantage, well, I understand your goals and values. I've had maybe 3 people in the history of my interview, long number of interviews that I've done. I've had maybe 3 or 4 people come in and say, I read about your goals and values. I think those are appropriate. That's why I think I'm a good fit here, because I like these values that you guys stand for. And I like your vision and your goals for the future. I want to be a participant in helping you achieve those goals. Whoa, that hit me pretty good. Most of them completely glossed over. Have you checked our company goals and values out on our website?
Yeah, or just say, yes, I did. Kind of like saying, so are you dependable? Yes, I am, but not be able to elaborate. And so I think having taken that extra step, not only to have read what the company's all about, but to be able to share that with the employer and maybe ask a question, a follow-up question.
Sure.
Hey, Mike, let me ask you this. This is a kind of a sales thing, and I don't know how deep in the weeds we need to get with this. So bear with me here, but there are situational questions, there are information questions, there are picture questions, there are all kinds of different questions. And so one of the challenges our clients face is, or one of the questions they have for me is, all right, what kind of questions should I ask? And you have a limited amount of time in the interview. So could you talk about the different types of questions and which ones you feel like are most valuable or most important to try to get in during the interview?
The questions that you need, that as the interviewee, what I need to ask?
Yes, as the candidate. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the questions I've always asked is, tell me about the company culture here and what you like and don't like about it. And if it's the person you're going to work for, I'd like to know about their leadership skills and how they work. Do they play well in the sandbox? Those are 2 really probing questions that gets them, because they immediately have to pony up some pretty good answers, because that may decide whether you want to work there or not. So what's the work environment like? What's the culture like? What do you like to work with? How successful has the team been? Is this a team that really edifies itself and really grows together, or is this a every man for himself type of attitude? You might, if you're talking to financial people, you want to talk about what some of their financial goals are. It's a private company, they may or may not tell you, but public companies, they'll talk about that kind of stuff, is where they want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And when you ask them those kinds of questions, they might want to say, oh, this person has an interest in where the company is going. And there's a couple of questions I'll save for at the end of our discussion today. But I think there are the idea of your questions is, and don't ask these questions. How much does this job pay? Don't ask them about the insurance benefits, how much vacation they got. Because I will tell you that if they're interested in you coming to work for them, they'll bring that up. You don't have to.
Sure.
If you bring that up, it's way premature for that part of the conversation.
I often
Yeah.
I often remind myself, and Mike and Randy, you guys know what my business is all about. Every day I'm looking for a new boss. Every day. That's what my business is all about. So I do the same activities that most job seekers, I believe, and as I would wager Mike and Randy would believe, should be doing every day, looking for a new boss. And so one of the things that I know is the worst thing I can do is ever talk about budget until I know that I got that job. Absolutely. You don't talk about budget being salary or benefits until you're pretty comfortable you've got that job and you've done all the right things. By the way, Mike, USP.
That's the
USP.
Yep.
Unique selling proposition.
Mm-hmm.
Very applicable to all of us who are in job search as well and or business. So I dropped that information in the chat box for people to see what I'm talking about. So go ahead.
Also, we've got about 20 minutes left. We have a couple more topics, and we're going to ask Mike to kind of wrap things up at some point here. And then Teddy and I will have a comment or two. We also have a pretty cool guest next week. Going to talk about body language and how body language plays a key role during your interviews.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try to break that down and understand how to read people's body language next week. Another question not to ask is something as simple as something you could easily find online. Now, you may ask a qualifying question about it, maybe, but if I just say, so what do you guys make? Or what do you sell? Or what does IBM stand for? If I'm interviewing with IBM, you see where I'm going? So those are things that they should know. So let's move on. This is a big thing that I think holds a lot of people back in life in general, not just salespeople. And that is the fear of rejection. Oh no. If they say no, then how do we deal with that rejection?
That's a simple and a complicated question all at the same time. In the sales role, in one sense, I distance myself from the actual sale of the widget or product or service, because if I've done my best and I can convince them that I have the best opportunity for them and I can give them a competitive advantage, then the loss is theirs. And I don't take it personal, because they're the one that's missing out on the savings, on the better budget, on the faster production, on better quality, whatever it is, they're the one that's missing out. And in a sense, if we can use that same kind of thinking, well, it's not personal. Yeah, it is. It is personal because it's you. It's about me and it's about what I can do. So that part's personal. But my last job search lasted a year, and I had some other things. I was underemployed, but the point being is, during that time, I came in second 9 times. And we're talking second out of 450 candidates, second out of 1,000 candidates, second out of 500 candidates. I mean, these weren't second out of 3. This was second out of several hundred qualified candidates. And so I always tried to ask, what it was that prevented me from getting the position. Now, most times they won't tell you, but it's always a good question to ask. And same in sales. Well, what objection did you have that I couldn't overcome? And I think if you can get someone to answer that question for you, give you some good feedback, maybe the other person is more qualified. Well, okay. I mean, that's part of what you have to deal with. So rejection is a part of life. No, everybody doesn't get a participating trophy. And you have to deal with that. And let's be honest, rejection stinks. It hurts. And here's my answer to that. Handle it with grace and style. Handle it because you'll be remembered for that. I've had people send me thank you letters for being turned down. They didn't say thanks for turning me down, but they said thank you for the opportunity to interview with you. I really enjoyed it. And if in the future you have another similar position open, I would really enjoy being considered for that. And guess what? They were considered for that the next time around. So handle it with grace and style, because having a temper tantrum and having pity parties, and that just hurts your energy, especially when you're in a specific, when you're a job search, you got to keep the momentum going. You can't just decide, well, I'm going to take a week off now because it sucked.
Something Teddy mentioned at one of our group events at our professional center was stick to your process. Stay with the process. You can't, short of holding a gun to somebody's head and forcing them to do something, you can't force somebody to hire you. You can work your process, do your homework, and at some point you say, you know what, maybe that wasn't the right fit for whatever reason, but you stay to the process. I'm going to hit a couple quick points here. When do you not sell, and is there another approach? When do you not sell, and is there another approach?
Well, first of all, you stop selling when the interview's over. And I've had people continue to run on. And I will tell people up front, and if you're ever in an interview and you're the interviewee and you're not sure exactly how much time you got, ask them, are we on a hard stop? Or when's your hard stop? That way you respect their timing. And they may decide to go over it. That's up to them. But you need to respect that. So when do you stop selling? You stop when the interview's over, because it's over, but I've seen people just continue to talk. And there's another thing called overselling. If you have a great virtue and you've explained it 3 times to them that you've got this great virtue, I don't need to hear it 4 or 5 times. I mean, generally once is enough for me. But as an overall rule, it's anything else. You're selling your competency based upon their needs, and repeating yourself multiple times doesn't work. If you're a good tax accountant, they know that. They know it because it's on your resume and you've talked about it. You don't have to keep telling them, well, tax accounting is my specialty.
So Mike, if I'm in an interview for a technology job, and but I really want to have a job because I'm a professional roller derby king, should I try to convince them to hire me as a roller derby king? They're in a technology business. Or I'm being really facetious here. I think you would say, just because you think they need this widget, but they're contacting you about this widget, don't try to sell this widget. That would be failure. You got to go in, really, the most successful way to go in in an interview is to be a consultative salesperson. Yeah.
Consultative
sales.
Can you
say that one more time louder?
You need to be a consultative salesperson. Does that help?
Yeah.
When you think about it, I can tell you what I think you need, but that's why I said at the very onset, you need to spend some time listening. I've been through the interview with a guy, sitting there. It was a sales position. It was a leadership position. He goes, okay, Mike, hands me his pen. Sell me this pen. And so the first question I asked him, what do you need in a writing instrument? What is the most important thing to you about this writing utensil or a writing utensil? And so he started describing some things. I said, okay, well, let me tell you about this. And then I went into my sales mode. Well, let me tell you about this pen, because this pen does this and this and this about what you just said. And of course, it was sort of fictitious role play. But ultimately, he said he wanted to hire me because the first thing I did was not tell him how great this pen was. I asked him what he needed. And one of the things I always end almost when I have time, and you're going to have time in the interview to ask questions, I always tell people, this is one question you need to have on your notepad, Teddy. And that is, what is the biggest problem in this departmental role or this personnel's role or this job description role? What is the biggest problem I can help you solve? Now, I will tell you this, if they tell you, you got to be willing to give them a 2 or 3 quick bullet point answer.
Yeah, exactly. And so the longer you can stay out of the selling phase as a sales guy and saying, hey, this is great, great product, you've got to uncover their points of perceived need. And you ask questions and you listen. And then based on what they've shared with you, those are their needs and wants. And then you try to address those. One last thing, and then I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. And that is, do the unexpected. So what does that mean?
Not necessarily like I said, not be outrageous, but let me give you an example of doing something unexpected.
Sure.
I have this job here in Atlanta running this laboratory, this automotive component laboratory, because I did something unexpected. And one of the things that I prepared for the interview as a general manager, I can almost guarantee you one of the questions they're going to ask you is, okay, well, if we get this job, what are some of the first things you're going to want to do here based upon your limited knowledge of it. So I put together a 90-day business plan. It was a page and a half long. And I said, you know, he asked me, he said, you know, you don't know much about us yet, but what would you do? I said, well, look, I pulled out my business plan. I've written a 90-day business plan. Here's the things that I would like to cover. Can we take 10 minutes and let me review this with you? Guy sat there with his mouth open. There were 5 people interviewing for this job. And the guy who was supposed to come down the next day, my recruiter called me. She's actually listening. She called me and said, they told the other guy on Friday to stay home. And
yep.
What a feeling is that? And the idea is I came prepared to answer a hard question, and I backed it up. I guarantee you, most people don't do that. They don't bring something with them. It could be a project example. It could be a widget you help design. It could be something in the form of an example of work that's not confidential, by the way. Don't bring anything confidential. But you could show them something that you've done, or maybe it's something you've done. I developed this widget. Or maybe you're bilingual or trilingual. You can demonstrate some of those kinds of things that other people may not be able to do. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, but it differentiates you. And they probably weren't expecting that.
Good point. Mike, we've got just a few minutes left. If you could just wrap up today, what are some takeaways that folks watching might want to take to heart and try to implement as they go through their job search?
Well, I think one is you got to be prepared, and it's okay to talk about yourself in an assertive way, but not in an arrogant way. I think that's important. Secondly, you got to be a good listener, because listening is what's going to help you, A, understand their questions better, and B, be able to respond. It's okay to pause between question and answer. Take a second to listen. You promote you and their needs, or you versus their needs, how you will help solve their problems. Talk about your competitive advantage. What it is you would give them an advantage. Like I said, be prepared. And then finally, and then Randy's going to love this one, close it. Close the deal. Now, I will tell you this. It is not appropriate at every interview to say, did I get the job? In fact, that's a bad thing to say. But here's what I recommend. And sometimes they'll tell you before you can ask. And that is, okay, we're completed here. What are the next steps? Where do we go from here? Because I'm ready to take the next step with you. And that shows your interest. And this is fairly common knowledge, but that's a very simple way to close the deal, is to ask what the next steps are. And you may have to ask some clarifying questions. Well, you know, we're going to do such and such and such. Great. What's the timing around it? So you're allowed to ask those kind of questions, but don't ever say, okay, did I get the job?
When do I start?
Hey, when do I start? Yeah.
So,
and I've had people ask me that.
I can't work on Mondays and Fridays, but I'll work in the rest of the week. So
yeah.
Well, good. Anything else, Mike, that you'd like to toss in there, and then Teddy and I'll take it on with some comments after that.
No, I think I have a tendency to ramble if I'm not careful. So I want to try to be concise and succinct in your answers when you talk. Make good eye contact. Smile. It's okay to smile in an interview. And you have the guest talking about body language next week, which is that's serious business, and it's really a powerful. Use that to give you competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element of the whole compatibility issue. You may have the great features and benefits and all that, but if, again, to your point with the body language and all of the nonverbal cues, if those aren't in place, you're facing an uphill battle. So, Mike, again, I appreciate you coming on. Stick around.
My pleasure.
Got another 6 or so minutes. So I'll share a story, and then Teddy, I'll send it to you to wrap it up and talk about Blanca, who is coming on next week. But thinking back, it was a dark and stormy night many years ago. I was an old radio guy and made a transition from working in radio. And from there, I went into being an executive recruiter. And I'll always remember a man named Gene was our recruiting manager. And each morning we'd have our, and this is before emails, fax machine era, just to give you an idea. For your recruiter person that's on the call, this was the fax machine era before computers. Every morning at our meeting, Gene would go to each of the recruiters and walk down each of our sendouts or candidates that were going on interviews. And his question would be, what happens next and when? And if you couldn't answer that question, you better be able to answer it. So anyway, you have to get on the phone right away and call the company to find out what the heck is going on. So again, to your point, it's not a case of saying, hey, do I get the job and when do I start? But you need to know what the next step is and when. And then I'll also share another kind of a quick story, I guess, back in my, I'm going to say, well, it was during that transition time between radio and the next chapter. I was about 30 at the time. And I was interviewing, which is weird. I was interviewing in a hotel room with a woman. Now, I was a married man at the time, but they were staying in this nice suites kind of hotel. And they had the office area set up. So here I am in a hotel room with a strange woman interviewing for a job selling textbooks to colleges in Ohio. And if you picture wintertime in Ohio, the snow and the slush and everything, that was the time of year. So I'm interviewing for this thing and, I'm trying my best and doing all the stuff you try to talk about and how great you are and ask questions and listen and all this. And the more I'm listening to her, I'm thinking, no way in God's green earth do I want to trudge up a hill in snow and ice in the dead of winter in Ohio to sell textbooks. And I don't know whether she could see it on my face, but at the end of the interview, and I knew better, I knew I should express interest in the position and what happens next and when and all that. But I couldn't bring myself to lie, if you will. I really didn't want the job after hearing a lot about it. But she said, call me the next day and I'll let you know. So I called her and she said, Randy, you were doing great. You were by far my best interview until the end. She said, you never asked for the job, not literally, but you didn't express interest. She said, I will never offer a position to someone who doesn't express interest in the job. And I've always remembered that. And so even if maybe you really, and this is advice for folks that are watching, even if you're not truly 100% interested, buy yourself some time at least, express the interest. You can always say no later, but I cut it off right then and there. And looking back, I probably shouldn't have done that. But that was a lesson learned. So I would encourage folks to express the interest, and you can always find a reason later on to turn it down. Yeah. Fair enough? Is that fair enough to say that?
Yep. Absolutely. That's fact. You don't have it. Sorry. You don't even have it, Randy, until they offer it to you.
Right. And I think sometimes people feel like, well, if I express too much enthusiasm and too much interest, they'll lowball me on salary because I'm desperate and I need it. No, I think if it's genuine, if the interest is genuine, you do all your homework, you do all the right kinds of things, ask good questions, they'll see that. They'll see it's genuine. And I know I yield back the balance because we are in the political season. I yield back the balance of my time to Teddy Burriss.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, I did not have to mute you. Listen,
the day is young, my friend.
Mike said three things. Consultative. No, I'm gonna go with it in the order I went with it. Rejection. You have to be willing to accept rejection. Be willing. I actually say it this way: as I'm Sandler sales trained, which is a sales process. You want to go for the no as quickly as you can. Go for the no. Get them to turn you down so you can go do what, Mike? Work on the next one. Which means in your rejection acceptance, you need to know you have other ideas to work on. Maybe not other offers, but other ideas. Number two, process. You're going to be more successful as a salesperson, more successful as a job seeker if you have a process that you have developed and refined, and you do what with it, Mike? Practice it. You've got to practice your process every single day. It can't be, well, let me go try this and see what happens. Or, you got to know what works, and you got to experiment with it and refine it so that it moves. What works, it moves you to the next step. What works moves you to the next step. Doesn't get you the sale, it moves you to the next step. Here's the last one, Mike. I really appreciate you saying consultative sales. You absolutely need to come to the conversation and think you're a consultative salesperson. You need to ask questions, listen to the problems, uncover ideas and issues and challenges, and then you need to share with them your ideas of how you can help them solve it. Maybe give them a little tip. Maybe give them an idea. Don't give it all to them. Mike, dude, thanks for the conversation today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. And Randy, on rejection in college, when we used to get rejection letters, we took them to the bar and they gave us a free drink.
Oh, we used to tape them on our dorm doors. And
okay.
Yeah. And so some people got rejected a little bit more than other ones. Let me
come back, guys. Come back. Okay.
There you go. Hey, we're about out of time.
Next week.
Take us home. Let's talk about our next week's special guest. And
next week we have Blanca Cobb. Blanca is a body language expert. She's world renowned. She's been all over the country on all types of TV shows and interviewed for some really cool body language problems. And she's practiced and studied and trained and educated. Body language is a key part of your job search, a key part of success, and I guarantee you that you'll get as much value out of it next week that we got out. Randy, stop that as we got out of our conversation of our sales guy today. So again, it's 101. Mike, thanks for coming. Randy, go off and behave.
That'll be the day. Have a good afternoon, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.